Oxnard City Council Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting, September 28th, 2021. This meeting is held pursuant to the State Emergency Services Act, the Governor's Emergency Proclamation, and the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, as extended by N-21-08 to allow members of the City Council or staff to participate via teleconference. As a precautionary measure to help slow the spread of COVID-19, the City Council facilities are temporarily closed to the public. The public is encouraged to view the meeting from home on the city's website at oxnard.org/city-meetings, Spectrum Channel 10, Frontier Channel 35, or YouTube at youtube.com/Oxnard News. Video recordings are typically available online immediately following the meeting. Please see the link for the Measure M pre-recorded presentation video for each agenda item below. The public can provide comment to the City Council via email at cityclerk@oxnard.org no later than 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Please identify the committee name, meeting date, and agenda item in the email subject line. A telephone option for public comments is also available at this time. Requests to speak must be submitted no later than 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Use the form on the city's website to submit your request, oxnard.org/city-meetings, or call City Clerk's office at 805-385-7803. I'll repeat that, 805-385-7803, or email your request to cityclerk@oxnard.org. The city has filed pre-election and post-election lawsuits regarding the validity of Measure M. We'll take the roll call, the posting of the agenda, and the flag salute, and we have the Water Resources Manager, Abraham Maldonado, willing and very grateful. He's going to lead the pledge salute, but something a little different. If we could have the interpreters, a big part of the city of Oxnard's reaching out to the members of the public was years ago. This council put in interpreters. We could just have them shout out if somebody could introduce them, because I'm not sure. Can we have the city manager introduce them, or the clerk, or they could introduce themselves?
Oh, they're both on. So if we can have Anna and David turn on your cameras and introduce yourself, that would be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, I think you're on mute, or we're on mute. Hang on a second.
I'm
David.
on the English channel, so I
Yes.
was.
Okay, we're on.
I was
We're on.
introducing myself in the Spanish channel. So for the English speakers, I'm one of the interpreters that.
We can hear you.
And Anna?
Yes.
Good evening. Yes. Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Thank you for accommodating me. I'll try to be smooth here. Can we take the roll call, Madam Clerk?
Yes. Member Zaragoza,
Here.
Member Lopez,
Here.
Chair Perrello.
Here.
The agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on September 21, 2021. Thank you.
And can we stand and follow Mr. Abraham Maldonado, the Water Resources Manager, in the Pledge of Allegiance? And I would like to ask for a moment of silence. The young woman and her child that perished at San Diego in the baseball thing, whatever evils and terrors they were going through, I hope they're in a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know people that are problems, there is an opportunity to get help. Thank you. Take it away, Mr. Maldonado.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any comments for items not on the agenda?
Let's see. Yes, we do have one caller, Mr. Lawrence Stein. Let me connect him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stein, if we could please ask you to unmute by pressing *6. Mr. Stein,
I am here.
wonderful. You have 3 minutes to speak, sir.
I'm somewhat concerned with the fact that the city clerk refuses to forward public record requests to the appropriate parties. I submitted a public record request for Public Works, and she has not forwarded the Public Works Department. I'm also concerned with the fact that Public Works is having the benefits paid for through private entities paid for by public entities. For example, we have the AWTF. Who's paying the debt service on AWTF? 40,000 ratepayers are paying the debt service on the AWTF to the tune of $7.5 million a year. How much are the beneficiaries of this program paying? They're paying less than $75,000 on a $7.5 million debt. They're getting the water and we're paying for it. They're not providing, we are not getting the benefits, but we're paying for it. Another issue, there's a pipeline to benefit some farmers. $10 million. Who's going to pay for the pipeline? The water fund's going to pay for the pipeline. Who pays the water fund? 40,000 ratepayers pay for the water fund. The people who are using the water are paying a diminished amount. Where's the equity in that? The other issue coming up is a contract renewal that's supposed to benefit these same private entities. The contract's going to be expiring next year. The city is seriously considering renewing the contract. We ratepayers, the 40,000 of us who are paying $15 a month for the great water we're not getting, will be paying for this service again if this committee agrees to renew the contract. This contract should not be renewed. There's been no benefit to the ratepayers. We're supposed to be getting water pump back credits for this, but now the pump back credits are being cut back. So instead of 100% of these pump back credits, we're not even getting the water for those credits, and they're going to cut back those credits. So all this hoopla about getting water back credit for the rate program, we're not getting those credits, and there's no water behind the credit. So what benefit is there to us to subsidize the ratepayer, to subsidize these farmers who are getting the water for a very nominal amount? They're not even paying the debt service on the water they're getting. 40,000 of us are paying the debt service, and we're not getting that benefit. I'd like this addressed and agendized on a future meeting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Madam Clerk, are there any other speakers? No? Okay. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. We have the City Council approval of minutes. That the Public Works and Transportation Committee approved the minutes for July 27th, 21 and September 14, 21, regular meetings as presented. Do we have any corrections, additions, or requests for removal from this item by members of the committee?
No, none.
Do we have any direction from the committee?
I'll move approval of the set of minutes presented today.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, can we take the roll call, please?
Yes. Member Zaragoza,
Yes.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Chair Perillo.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
thank you very much. The next item is D1 under reports. Public Works Department, subject, award agreement for automated meter infrastructure installation project PW 17-32. The recommendation that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend that the City Council approve and authorize the following for a total of $30,481,628.12 in the project funds for the Advanced Meter Infrastructure, commonly referred to as AMI, installation project PW 17-32, project number 206503. There are 4 parts to this. The first part, the mayor to award and execute agreement A-8371 with Badger Meter Incorporated for $22,062,283.12 for installation of water meters. The second part is a project contingency amount of $2,206,228. The third part, a project allocation of $2,206,228 for engineering, inspection, survey, and project management. And the fourth part, the mayor to award and execute agreement A-8350 with Corolla Engineering for $4,006,889 for construction management services. The video presentation was available. It will not be shown because of the required Measure M pre-recorded presentation video. The contact person is Mr. Brian Yennis. Now, any questions or discussion on this item? The first thing is, I'd like direction from the management. Are we taking these one item at a time or collectively?
These can be done together, sir.
Okay. The second point I'd like to, again, our city engineer, Tatiana Ehrenroot, has done a bang up job of making her presentation. So do we have any questions or concerns by members of the committee, or better yet, any public comments?
We do not have any public comments, Chair Perrello.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any questions or concerns from my committee members?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I understand, of course, that one of the main reasons we're doing this, exchanging the advanced meter infrastructure installation project is because most of the old meters we have are not working anymore. And there's not sufficient parts to replacement parts because they're so old. So I know it's a tremendous amount of money, but we have to start someplace. And I think this is potentially the place to start, replacing all those meters that need to be replaced. Mhm.
Councilmember Lopez. Do you have any more questions, Mayor? Or
No, that's good. I just want to
Thank
make
you.
that comment.
Councilmember Lopez?
Thank you, Chair, and I will certainly follow along. When I visited the water site over by 3rd Street, a few years ago, well, not years ago, this was definitely before COVID, when we could do a little bit more in person. So I got to see, the difference in what these water meters looked like, and got a little bit of that briefing from our staff there. So I know that this has been a project in the works for quite some time, a lot of staff time. So I do appreciate that, and I'm very supportive of this. I just want to get some clarification or some additional information if Ms. Arnaud or Mr. Yanez could follow up. With the project, the implementation of or the installation of these water meters, it's going to take a few years to get through. I believe it was about 40,000, correct? And so in the staff report, there was a mention about a pilot program of 250 meters. So I just want to ask if you can elaborate on what that piece of this project is.
Good evening, committee chair, committee members. Brian Young is Assistant Public Works Director. Yes, that's a great question, and I'd love staff to elaborate on that question. And I believe Timothy can answer that question. And it's a really good question, and I love this answer. And it is a great project coming up.
Thank you, committee and chair, for the opportunity. So when you're introducing this new technology, what we like to do is do a small pilot program, and these are cellular read meters. So they do work similar to a text message. And as we all know, calls drop out, and new technology does make promises that we do want to test prior to implementing it throughout the entire city. So what we've done is we've taken an area where we know we have newer water services, and we can install these new meters and do a test run. And what this will include is the cellular read, which means that we no longer have people opening up every single meter box. It is sent on a monthly basis. And this will also give us the opportunity to start integrating into our billing system and making sure that things can go smoothly. And what's nice about this manufacturer that is the low bidder on this is that they have used our existing billing system as well as a future billing system. And so we're hoping that a lot of those hiccups have been ironed out. We're not on the cutting edge, which in some ways is quite nice. And so we're not expecting very many problems. With that being said, we still do want to test it on ourselves with a small batch.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And let's say someone says, how can I get the water meter? Like, will residents see a difference, or is this more, internally on the city side that we will really see the difference of these meters?
That's a great question. So residents do have the opportunity with these new meters they have a customer interface. These meters are able to have leak detection and things of that nature. Now, that's part of the reason why we chose a newer part of our system. So hopefully these problems don't pop up. But for instance, if there's been not a 15-minute span of some form of water usage, then a warning goes out. And we can also even trend where water is being used and things like that. And that allows the customer access to theirs. Now on our end, what we will definitely see is that these older meters do start to lose accuracy over time, and these new meters will recapture some of that accuracy. So as part of our water loss audit and other things that are required through our water division, we will be able to show that we're capturing more of those flows.
Great, thank you. So very timely, given the situation that we're facing with water at this time too. So thank you for that.
I have a few questions. Just one clarification. You mentioned that the low bidder, my understanding was there were several bidders, but this was the only successful bidder because the others two were found to be a problem. Is that correct? Okay, you're nodding your head, yes?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have, it's mentioned that the residents in a well done report, thank you. It's mentioned the residents will only be out for about 20 minutes when we change the water meter. From personal experience in different places I've lived in the city of Oxnard, the water boxes occasionally, the meter boxes, fill up with soil. I believe it's going to take more than 20 minutes to dig the soil out to get to the meter. So will there be a multi-day progression where one day they clean out all the boxes, then they come back in 20 minutes, the person's going to be out of water? Is that how it's to work?
Well, they wouldn't actually shut off the water until the meter box is cleaned out. So you wouldn't want to turn off water and expose a pipe to dirt at the same time. So they will leave the water on as they excavate or clean out the boxes, because due to gophers and just time, dirt does fill them in. And so they would not turn them off until that has been completed. And 20 minutes from my experience, is a pretty conservative amount of time for what it actually takes. I mean, these are, two nuts that are loosened and the meters dropped in place and then tightened with new washers and gaskets. So it's really a 10-minute exercise that we're being a little bit generous on. Okay, and thank you very much, because I know that some of the meters I've seen, the biggest black widows I've ever seen in my life in some of those boxes. I appreciate the fact that we're going with an all stainless and there's no lead in them. That has not been an issue, but it's something the public is well aware of with what happened in Flint. And I'm grateful for that. I had the opportunity several years past to have a demonstration of the different people that were providing meters. I have a tremendous amount of faith that this is going to work out and help us out. And as far as the water, I believe that we've been told that these meters, for the most part, are past their life expectancy. Everything has everyone I'm looking at screen, there is a definite starting and ending date in our lives. These hard mechanical parts, same thing. And when they go past their life expectancy, they either leak or we don't get true readings. And as Councilmember Lopez explained, the current situation with water, we need to know what we're supplying, and we need to get compensated for what we're supplying. I really appreciate this item going forward. I understand it's going to take a period of time, but I appreciate this. Once we do our test, will there be some site that the residents can find out where the water meters are going to be put into neighborhoods,
Will it be a street that we do, or will it be a neighborhood that we do? How is that, or is that yet to be determined?
No, that has been determined. I guess you could say I've done a little bit of overkill on our public outreach. So we have a role as the city, which we are working with our public outreach group to, creating documents and brochures so people understand how to read their meter. Now, as part of our construction management company, they also did the city of Sacramento. And if you actually look on their website, you can see that there's a map, and that map shows where we are working, where we plan to be working, and where we have already finished. And that will give residents a bit of an idea of how we're progressing.
Sounds first class. That's a compliment. Sounds very first class. I did see something where in the process, the agreement is that the contractor doing the work will be responsible for the removal and disposal of any items, so the old meters. If that is not the case, and if the old meters are laying around in the city, I want to make sure that there's no possibility of somebody taking them and selling salvage, that the city does not get compensated. I know has been a concern. So other than that, I have no questions. Does the council have any more questions?
Mr. Chair, I have
Yes,
one quick
Mayor.
question. I know that Timothy was saying it takes X amount of minutes to exchange a meter. Is that the same for commercial, for apartments? Because aren't they bigger meters?
So depending on the apartment size, we might get 2-inch meters, maybe slightly bigger. And it does take a little bit more time, but at the same amount, it's a minimum number of bolts, and lay lengths and things of that nature tend to be industry standard. So if we are pulling out an old meter, the one we're dropping in should be fitting right in its place.
And also, we probably need to convey the message to the apartment dwellers and owners that the water is going to be off for maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever the number is. I think that's important.
Yes, and what we've done as well is we have included mailers 2 weeks prior as part of the contract for the contractor to be issuing those mailers and notifying. And at the same time, Omar Castro will be using his customer service people to help fulfill those calls and things that may come up.
To convey the messages. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. That's all I have.
Okay, do we have a recommendation on this item? And I
So
support-
move.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Chair Perillo,
Yes,
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Member Zaragoza.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
and I'd like to say this sounds like it's going to be a first-class operation, and if there are any hiccups, we have the appropriate people in place to take care of it. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is Public Works Department under reports. The subject, 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Storage Contingency Plan. The recommendation that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend that the City Council, number one, receive a presentation and hold a public hearing to receive public comment on the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Storage Contingency Plan. And number two, adopt a resolution to approve the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Storage Contingency Plan and authorize the city staff to file the plans with the state of California. This presentation will be live upon the consultant's request. Now, the only question that I have, the city attorney, in reading this document, it says we are to receive the public comments. Do we need to open this up as a public hearing?
Not yet.
Mr. Chair, no, that's the recommendation to
Right,
forward
to
to the council to hold the public hearing. So here
Okay,
it's just
so-
informational.
So we're going to get a first shot at the presentation. Is that-
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, and I have it down here as Mr. Brian Yanis, so if we could introduce whoever's going to be making the presentation. I
Chair
appreciate it. Thank you.
Perillo, Chair Perillo, we do have
Yes.
one public comment for this particular item. Would you
Okay.
like to hear it now?
I'll tell you what, let them listen to the presentation. They may see something that would address, add, or subtract from their comment.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair Perillo.
Again, Chair, committee members, Brian Young, Assistant Public Works Director. We have our consultant available who's going to make a presentation on the Urban Water Management Plan, which is a regulatory mandate that we do every 5 years. And I will, Omar Castro, if you would like to introduce our consultant, we'll get started.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Actually, I'm going to pass this over to our Water Resource Manager, Abraham Maldonado, who will be making the introduction.
Wow, there are lots of introductions to introductions to introductions. This is like the red carpet. Go for it.
Good evening, members of the Public Works and Transportation Committee, Mayor, City Manager, City staff, and the viewing public. My name is Abraham Maldonado, and I am the Water Resources Manager for the City of Oxnard's Water Division. The City of Oxnard's Water Division Manager, Water Division staff, and our consultant, Water Systems Consulting, has worked diligently to prepare the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan as required by the State of California. The Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan provide a long-term view of our water resources and provision to continue to manage and provide a safe and reliable water source to our community. The state provided a guidebook on the Urban Water Management Plan preparation in early April 2021, resulting in a slight delay in submitting the plan by the July 1st, 2021 due date. This evening, we have Spencer Waterman from Water Systems Consulting, who will provide an overview of the draft 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. Spencer, I will now pass it on over to you.
I'm sorry, Spencer, this is the city manager, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but what's your last name?
Waterman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How appropriate.
Mr. Waterman, may I interrupt? Mr. Maldonado, sometimes I do get comments from the public, and I'd like to ask it right now. We just had an item. We were a little bit late. Are there penalties involved when we're a little bit late?
Fortunately, no, there are no penalties.
Thank you very much. And I apologize, Mr. Waterman, please go ahead.
No problem.
No problem.
All right. I will share my screen here. So is my screen being shared now?
Almost.
Yeah.
It's looks like it's trying to fire off.
It's asking you to double click to enter full screen mode.
Interesting. Sorry about that.
Double click.
I'm not actually seeing any Zoom controls anymore.
Is that at the bottom of your screen? I think it's a green icon, share, present or share.
Yeah.
Your screen is showing to us, but it's waiting for you to double click to enter full screen.
Yeah, I understand that. The Zoom program has seemed to have disappeared as soon as I tried to share my screen. So, oh, looks like.
All right. Yeah, try it again.
All right, let's give this another try.
Oh. Should tell him that.
Are you using tabs or separate windows? There we go.
Okay, so
that's better.
This is the chair speaking. When I share with my fellow council members, I'm very grateful somebody there and the city manager, Mr. Uwmp, thank you. Because if he asked me how to do this, I haven't a clue. So thank you.
All right.
Council member, we're going to wait till we get those water meters and see if you can do it in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Is my screen showing up now?
You're on screen. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, everybody. All right. Well, thank you for having me here tonight. As Abraham said, I'm Spencer Waterman. I'm with Water Systems Consultant, and we're working with the city on its 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, commonly called the Uwmp, as well as the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, commonly called the WSCP. And in this presentation, I'll go over the key parts of the Uwmp and WSCP, and then we can discuss any feedback you have on the plans. So on the agenda for this presentation are the following core components of the UWMP, and we'll dig into each one a little bit more as we go through the following slides. So to start off with a bit of background about UWMPs, they're required by the California Water Code, and they must be updated every 5 years. The California Department of Water Resources, or DWR, develops guidance to help meet the water code. The intent is for the UWMPs to support near-term and long-term planning for supply, demand, drought, and other potential shortages. To ensure a robust analysis, it's encouraged that water suppliers coordinate with their land use planning staff. The demand management measures portion of the UWMP addresses long-term conservation programs. The WSCP provides a framework for shorter-term water shortage and response. New requirements for this UWMP cycle include adopting the WSCP as a separate standalone document from the UWMP. And the intent of that is to allow flexibility to amend the plan separately if needed. Lastly, UWMPs are a prerequisite for certain loans and grants. As required by the Water Code, the city coordinated with many other agencies in developing this UWMP, and this is a list shown here of those agencies that we've worked with so far. In addition to notifying other local agencies, the city has also communicated to the public through outreach and posting the draft plans to the city's website, as well as holding a community meeting in July. The required elements for the UWMP and the WSCP are shown in this table. The first 3 chapters give the background and the setting of the city, as well as the UWMP process. Then the water use and water supply chapters inform the water service reliability and drought risk assessment chapter to identify long and short-term potential shortages. These in turn inform the description of long-term conservation measures known as demand management measures, or DMMs for short, as well as shorter-term measures which are covered in the WSCP. We'll discuss the WSCP a little bit more in more detail later on in the presentation. The Senate Bill X7-7, or SBX 7-7 for short, chapter explains the city's compliance with per capita water use standards that were established in the 2010 and 2015 UWMPs. Lastly, the UWMP process and adoption and implementation is documented. So a big change since the 2015 plan is the update of water demand projections. This chart shows historical gross water use in acre feet per year, or AFY, and the chart also shows water use in gallons per capita per day, or GPCD. The city used 116 GPCD in 2020, thus achieving compliance with using less than the SBX 7-7 2020 water use target, which was 140 gallons per capita per day. Since the end of the most recent multi-year drought ending around 2016, demand has remained about 15% lower than pre-drought levels. And much of this reduction is the result of installation of more efficient toilets and wash machines and irrigation equipment, as well as permanently reduced outdoor watering times. These historical demand trends that are shown in this slide were used to inform projecting future demands. The city's Public Works Department developed projected water demands in coordination with the city's Community Development Department. Future demand was based on forecasted population consistent with the 2030 general plan, as well as data from the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG. And future demands are assumed to have lower water use trends due to compliance with forthcoming conservation mandates that are established from the governor's 2018 legislative initiative of making water conservation a California way of life. So to estimate future demand, several assumptions were developed with city staff. Assumptions include applying a 55 GPCD factor to the future population estimates for indoor residential demand estimates. And then there's an assumption for slight increases in commercial, industrial, and institutional demand. And it's assumed that there will be a continuation of existing levels of irrigation demand to account for increased growth while simultaneously increasing efficiency and reducing water use. Lastly, there's an assumed reduction in water losses that's informed by DWR performance standards that have to be met.
Excuse me, Mr. Waterman, before we leave that slide, fellow council members, if you have any questions, please let me know. We'll ask the questions as we go along. A lot of information coming here. My first question. The second bullet point, 55 GPCD. If you get any more acronyms like that and there's not a description of what it is, please fill us in. What does GPCD mean?
Yes, that is gallons per capita per day.
Okay, that would be gallons per home per day?
Gallons per person per day is.
Okay, per person. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I see no other sign that anybody else has a question, but Councilman Lopez and Mayor Zaragoza, you got a question? We'll ask it because the full council will be expecting us to know what we're talking about going in. Mayor, you have a question?
Mr. Waterman, the question I'm going to ask, and it's probably someplace in your presentation, is depends on how much water we use, and we have a major drought upon us and so forth. When do you think maybe we might get some legislation to use gray water to convert gray water into potable water?
Yeah, I wish I had the crystal ball on that. I'm not sure, but it's definitely something that's being considered. So I don't have any details on what the state's going to do, but it's definitely being considered.
Because we have a lot of gray water, of course, that's millions of gallons are dumped into the ocean and so forth, so anyway, so I'm just thinking maybe that, or it could be used for get potable water, maybe for watering, of course, golf courses or parks or mediums. I know we have gray pipes, but those something that I think we need to look at.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll get into that a little bit too with looking at recycling use.
Thank you.
All right, so there are future efficiency standards that are being developed by the Department of Water Resources, and those weren't available at the time of development of these projections, but we used what they had available and the frameworks that they had. However, these plans do come on a 5-year cycle. So the city has proactively planned to work with a company developing software specifically to meet those forthcoming standards. And that company's software is called WaterView. And it will be used for a more specific analysis that uses per parcel geographical information system mapping. And it includes data such as landscape measurements and irrigable area, census data, and city customer consumption records to really drill into more accurate demand projection and tracking in compliance with state standards. For now, the Uwmp uses a higher level demand methodology. As I mentioned, it's a gallons per capita per day based approach. So development-specific water demand factors aren't included in that methodology, and details on the city's land use-based water demand factors are included as part of the Public Works Integrated Master Plan. So that would be the place to go when evaluating individual projects. All right, so to meet potable and recycled water demands, the city will rely on local groundwater, imported water, as well as recycled water. Local groundwater comes from the Oxnard Plain groundwater basin and also from United Water Conservation District. Imported water comes from Callegas Municipal Water District. And the city currently blends groundwater and imported water to achieve an appropriate balance for water quality, quantity, reliability, and cost. Lastly, recycled water comes from the Advanced Water Purification Facility. And currently recycled water is used for agricultural, industrial, and irrigation applications. But the projections in this Uwmp also include plans for recycled water being used and expanded to include groundwater recharge and indirect potable reuse. The water supply, as mentioned in the previous slide, are expected to provide volumes of water shown in this table through the year 2045 in order to meet projected demands. It's important to note that the city will likely have more water available than shown here if needed, but only anticipates using only as much as needed, striving to provide more reliable and affordable service. While the city has historically received enough supply to meet demand, the supply portfolio is dynamic, and historical conditions may not accurately represent scenarios that might happen in the future. So therefore, supply and demand were estimated for dry years, considering a variety of factors for each source, including but not limited to groundwater allocations, wholesale allocations, agreements with neighboring agencies, production capacity, and water quality standards. While supply constraints vary by source, depending on those various factors I mentioned, as well as hydrology and rainfall, current groundwater conditions, or wholesale allocations, or even statewide mandated water conservation, the city can adaptively manage its water supply portfolio to meet the respective demands. And demands tend to fluctuate in response to local rainfall conditions. So therefore, if rainfall is used to determine normal and dry year scenarios that need to be met with a dynamic supply portfolio, considering the supply constraints at the given time. We did our best estimate for plausible scenarios. However, those can change, and the city has a plan in place to adaptively manage to those. The percent change in demand shown in this table for each dry year compared to a normal year corresponds to anticipated demand pattern changes during a drought cycle. So in the first year of a drought, or even if you just have one single dry year of drought, demands usually increase, particularly outdoor demands. So that's reflected in this table here. And then for extended droughts that last multiple years, it's anticipated that demands will eventually reduce after that first year of increase as a result of conservation measures implementation, as well as usage behavior changes due to social awareness of drought. So based on the analysis of supply and demand in dry years, it's expected that the city will continue to be able to adaptively manage its water supply portfolio, and will continue to promote water use efficiency and water conservation to meet demands in normal and dry years.
Excuse me, Mr. Waterman, can you go back to that slide, please?
Sure.
Do you have the ability to use a pointer and show us where you identified the dry years is going to impact us so that we conserve more the following year?
Yes.
Give me an example of what you were talking about, please.
So this is
pointer.
So this is can you see my mouse here?
Yes, I see it.
Okay. So this is a standard table from DWR that has to be completed. And so what they want you to do is identify a historical 5-year period that reflects your lowest supply availability. And so we look back at rainfall conditions, and then it wants you to apply those historic 5-year conditions to future years. And so where's my pointer here? So if we're looking at 2025, we say the first year of drought happens, we expect that the demands will be about 27,000 acre feet. But then we expect that they would gradually reduce in subsequent years of drought due to conservation and awareness of the drought. And so these are just showing 5-year cycles in 5-year increments through 2045.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. Next slide. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, water use efficiency will continue to be a valuable resource management strategy for the city. The various programs that have been successful for water use efficiency are summarized in the Demand Management Measures chapter, or DMM chapter. The city anticipates continuing these successful water use efficiency and conservation programs to support providing reliable service. Some important DMMs that have been discussed tonight that are coming in the future are AMI, automated metering infrastructure. So that's going to be a huge benefit to tracking and monitoring usage, as well as identifying programs to help usage be more efficient. The city also continues to expand water conservation staff focused on educational outreach, as well as programs for the community. So while the projections show that the city is expected to meet long-term demands while continuing to promote conservation, there is a potential for shorter-term shortages due to a combination of foreseeable and unforeseeable events, such as an earthquake, for example. If there were to be a shortage, the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, or WSCP, provides a plan to address shortages. There are some required elements for the WSCP, which are shown in this table here. I'll also note that this is kind of the largest change from the 2015 Uwmp requirements. These new required components for the WSCP are all new this time around. So the water supply reliability analysis is summarized from section 7 of the Uwmp, which we showed a couple slides ago when we walked through that table about expected changes in demand and supplies to meet those demands. The annual water supply and demand assessment procedures, commonly known as the annual assessment, outlines how to complete the assessment, including what key data points are looked at, what evaluation criteria is used, and then the overall methodology to determine if a water shortage will occur in the coming year. So that's a new requirement, and the first annual assessment will be due to DWR in July of 2022.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Water. So those are mandated items that we have to comply with, right? No, number 1 and number 2, what are the penalties if we don't comply?
As far as defining the process to assess these shortages?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if the plan isn't turned in, if the assessment isn't turned in July 2022, there could be, repercussions similar to the UWMP. So if you're not in compliance, potentially you could not be eligible for grant and funding opportunities. And the water code does lay out the ability for the state to develop more punitive measures if necessary. I think in my experience, they don't ever want to do that. So they try to agencies come into compliance as much as they can.
Okay.
And, this WSCP kind of lays out the process for how the city will develop this assessment each year.
Very important. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So to help avoid confusion with neighboring agencies and other agencies in the state, DWR has recommended that agencies include 6 standard water shortage stages. And the city has used these 6 standard stages in its WSCP. These shortage stages range from 10% shortage to a greater than, to a greater than 50% shortage. And they increase in increments of 10%. Shortage response actions are identified and could be implemented to help mitigate a water shortage. And those are described in the WSCP. And also outlined is how the city will communicate with its customers and the public, as well as other agencies during a shortage. The WSCP also describes compliance and enforcement actions to implement shortage response actions and potential demand reduction measures, and the legal authority required to do that, as well as potential financial impacts from enacting a different stage of the WSCP also is included in there and is discussed. Furthermore, there's also a discussion of monitoring and reporting assessments to help the city determine if additional response actions may be needed during a given shortage stage. There's a minor part in there which talks about special water feature distinctions, and really that's just talking about specifically regulations for decorative features separately from measures for pools and spas. And this is just a small little requirement from DWR just to specify the difference between those two. Lastly, there's a section on procedures for refining the WSCP, adoption, submittal, and availability for that process. And the overall intent for all of these components is to lay out an actionable plan for identifying potential shortages and responding to them effectively. And really, a lot of the effort to update the city's current WSCP included documenting sources and protocol that the city already carries out as part of proactive management. The WSCP is intended to be a guide to help the city and customers identify shortages and how to respond to them. And the various levels of potential shortage are categorized as shortage stages, as I discussed earlier, the 6 stages. And as I mentioned, the city has aligned with DWR's recommendation to use these 6 stages. Lastly, the WSCP is now required to be a standalone document incorporated into the Uwmp, but it can also be amended separately from the Uwmp if needed. So as the Uwmp is on its 5-year cycle, year to year, as the city is looking at supply and demand, if there's a need to change shortage stages or to change the contingency plan, that can be done separately from the Uwmp. All right, so in summary, the key takeaways from the Uwmp are that the city's supply is expected to meet demands through 2045, and that includes during normal years and anticipated dry years. However, in the event that there are short-term shortages, the city's updated WSCP provides a roadmap for anticipating and responding to them. The city has achieved the required conservation target from SBX 7-7 and is positioned to continue meeting forthcoming efficiency targets. Lastly, the Uwmp is anticipated to meet all DWR requirements and maintain funding and grant eligibility. So with that, I'd like to thank you for all your time so far, and I'm open to hearing any input that you have on these plans. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waterman. Madam Clerk, we had a public speaker. Can we see if they're ready to go?
Yes. Mr. Stein. Hello, Mr. Stein. You have 3 minutes to speak.
First of all, the city clerk refuses to make, the city clerk refuses to forward documents, public record requests to this department on this particular matter. The concern I have is we have a water master plan. That was supposed to have been presented to us. We have not seen a water master plan. I'd like to remind our city council members, we have a water neutrality policy. The only problem with this policy is the city council makes sure, the city council is not giving the information that this policy has not been enforced. All new development is supposed to be water neutral. Our new development has not been water neutral. Another issue we have, in fact, is the Fox Canyon Groundwater Agency wants to cut our pump back allocations by 40% over X number of years. That has not been considered. We've had the great program in operation since September 2012, but not one drop in 9 years has been blended into the groundwater system. The great program was presented to the public as being the backbone of water supply. but has been more of a sewer drop to our money. We have private entities getting the water. We're supposed to be getting pump back credit, but we're not getting those pump back credits because there's no water. When we talk about this plan, some other concerns we need to measure is the typical household uses half an acre foot per water per year. The charts being presented to us have noted that we're going to be expecting 27,000 acre feet of water coming up in the next few years. 27,000 acre feet. Let's see now, if we take 4 skids of great water, oh, that's 20,000 acre feet. God be willing, perhaps if we built the darn ASR wells like we have not built, we start using ASR wells, maybe we can actually have water for the population that's paying for these wells. Because we're paying for the great program, but we're not getting the water. We're running out of water or not getting the water. So we have demand for water. We have a source of water, but the city has not dropped the capital to build the ASR wells. The ASR well is still being intestinal. Other cities had ASR wells and groundwater recycling have been allocated for quite some time because it's oceanside. But we keep on taking this money, we spend our money to private developers, and we don't spend it on the public. We're putting $10 million pipeline that's not going to benefit us. So we need to take care of our other issues. We talked about water fountains. Water fountains, the city does not enforce the non-use of water fountains. We got to have these commercial properties with water fountains. There you go. But that's an act of conservation, cutting back the water for the water fountains, these decorative devices. But we don't cut that back because we were supposed to cut that back years ago, but we didn't do that because our city council cares more about private entities
Your time
than
is
about
up.
the general public.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. You do make some good points. You have been on this for a long time, and you do make some good points. Do we have any questions from council?
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank Mr. Waterman and Abraham and Brian and Omar, for, I think that makes me feel real good that our WSCP, we're following the guidelines. They were looking at several years of drought and hopefully rain too and so forth. That I believe that the city is in good hands as far as water usage is concerned and the potential water availability in the future. So I just want to thank you for a very good presentation, by the way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Lopez.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the presentation, Mr. Waterman. A lot of information to take in at once, especially, looking through the document, which is available on our city website, the Urban Water Management Plan. I mean, it's a lengthy document to process and a lot of information and the complexities of legislation and what these goals are. So I'm glad to see that the city is in a good place, but at the same time, considering the statewide issue with water and the best practices for conservation. Can you talk a little bit more and really kind of taking it down to a basic question about how these numbers or the number of gallons, I think it was the gallons per capita per day per resident, how is that based on considering, the population? Can you talk a little bit more about that? And I bring that up because we just went through the 2020 census and, is that a factor in this? And how do we, put it together with the fact that perhaps we don't know an accurate number if there was an undercount of how many residents we have?
Yeah, so the gallons per capita per day standard that we use to estimate residential demand, that's based on a study from the Department of Water Resources, and they're still looking at that. At the time that we developed these projections, that was their initial recommendation for where the water use efficiency standard would start. However, since then, they've come out with more information in another study and eventually they want agencies to get down much lower than that. And so it gets a little bit more complex with the standard that they're going to be enforcing. It's not in place yet, so that's why we didn't include it. We just kind of included what their initial estimate was with the 55 gallons per capita per day.
Thank you. And kind of looking through the report in terms of, what the recommendations are, if we're expecting people to consume even less water, what are the practices that we need to, set in motion to reduce that consumption? Whether it's construction, housing. I mean, we're expecting to build more homes. Where the need for housing is increasing, and yet the water consumption, it needs to decrease. And so, how do we find a balance between those two expectations?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think there are a couple of key target areas for most agencies, and for a lot of agencies, the big area to reduce water use is in water loss. So throughout the last drought, customers have already, saved a lot of water and have continued to save a lot of water. So, folks could still reduce water usage by, just by using more efficient technology. So as plumbing codes change and irrigation equipment gets more efficient, that'll kind of naturally bring down the individual customer water usage. And so the city has plans in place to implement programs to promote that. But then I would say that the key part is really targeting that water loss reduction. And there is a standard that will be enforced to really tighten up on that aspect of water use, and AMI is going to be a great tool for that. So I applaud the city for investing in that. And that also, on the flip side, will help identify water losses. It'll help customers to understand how much they're using, and just having that real-time data is so helpful for customers to look at their water use and know if they're high and be able to bring that down if needed. So I think that program is probably one of the most impactful ones, and you guys are already on the ball for it. So
thank you. I appreciate that. And I think there's, I think a lot more, generally speaking, I think that to my colleagues on the council, education that is needed on water consumption, water usage, water conservation in general. And even what this plan means for the city, not just today, but looking ahead based on the predictions, through 2045, even, to be conservative in that timeline. So I do appreciate the information. I think there's a lot more discussions that we need to have to make sure that we are doing what we can within our capacity as a city, and making sure that the resources that have been invested in the past, including the Great Water Program, that we are making the best use of it for really the benefit of our entire city. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll conclude there.
Thank you. Number one, Mr. Waterman, thank you very much. And I'll ask some questions, and if any staff wants to address any of the questions from the public speaker, just let me know. And it's an open, this is a very important matter. I'd like to address a couple of things. There was a comment by the mayor about gray water going to the ocean. Our gray water goes to the GREAT program. Our gray water is basically what comes out of the bathtub, the toilet, the laundry, whatever goes into the sewer system at a residential house or apartment goes into the sewer system, goes to the gray water, and very little of that goes to the ocean. Most of it ends up in the recycling. One of the concerns, and one of the things that's been a hot topic, and I got an education that I did not expect recently, there's been a big push to get storm drain water. The stuff when people wash the car, when the storm drains off Doris, when the storm drains on Channel Islands, when the storm drains off Ventura Road. Maybe we can trap those and put them into the reclamation project that we have at the end of Perkins Road. It turns out the requirements for that type of material are much more stringent than what we have at the GREAT program, at the reclamation, the water reclamation site. It's going to be much harder and much more expensive. The issue about the city of Oxnard and the water, my fellow council members, I'm sure you're aware of it. We have a real tiger in the tank with with a deputy city manager, Cherie Klima. She is a tiger with respect to going after and protecting the city of Oxnard's rights for water. As the public speaker mentioned, and as the report Mr. Waterman gave, there is a plan. They're going to reduce the amount of water that we're able to get. But there is also litigation. The city is involved in some of it. But there's also been a suit for adjudication. And before we get off this, I know Mr. Paul Early is on. Before I get done, please, if you can, give the legal definition of what adjudication means, because we're talking about all the wells on the Oxnard Plains. The other parts are, it was mentioned by the public speaker, the fountains, the outdoor decorative features, River Park, the golf course lakes, the fountain at the corner of Rose and Fifth Street. I mean, there's other sites, and they're very attractive and nuisance, very attractive features, not nuisance, not, take that back, scratch that, or strike it, whatever the word. I made a boo-boo there, not a nuisance. But they're a feature that we have, which are subject to evaporation and the loss of water that we can't reclaim. The issue that comes up with respect to the state of California and droughts, there were counties that were deemed out of the drought. To my knowledge, and somebody on staff, please correct me, Ventura County was never deemed out of the drought, but we have not gone back to the water rationing where you can only water certain days and other days you can't water. And there was much more of an eagle eye on that. From the looks of the litigation coming on from other agencies and the length of time that I'm being told it'll take for that litigation to go forward, 15 years, we're looking at some serious problems with respect to, as Councilmember Lopez said, there's a tremendous urgency to have more housing. And if we do get to the spot where we have need to reduce, and Mr. Waterman, thank you very much for explaining the 55 gallons, what it meant and the reduction, we might go, and Mr. Waterman, I'm going to use this and I really appreciate, I don't know if you planned it or not, but you've set me up with a perfect shot here. In your background on your photograph, you show potted plants. It may be that communities go to more of that versus lawns and outdoor landscaping, maybe, because I believe that one thing that will happen that will be focused and we did not address, water will get to a price where people cannot afford it, and there will be decisions made if they can live in the area. And that's a cold-blooded way to look at it, but I believe that's what will happen. There are a lot of things going on. Water is a big deal. We live in the West. They got a comment. Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. Old comment, but it's true. And with the litigation going on, and unfortunately, my fellow council members, when we only have one interested member of public speaking on this item, it gives us an idea how many people are asleep at the switch. But when they wake up and they don't have water, or it's too expensive, you can bet we'll need more than 30 minutes for public comment. Is there any staff that could address some of the concerns that I had? Mr. Early, can you address what adjudication would mean? And is there any staff that could address some of the questions Mr. Stein asked?
Sure, Chair Perlow, I can address the adjudication issue. Just for clarity, a lawsuit was filed a couple of months back, and what it was to adjudicate the rights of all groundwater users in the Oxnard Basin. So as water becomes more scarce in the basin, people are all affected by that and start to fight over who gets how much. And so that adjudication is a legal process by which all the parties are entered into one legal action, and a judge ultimately decides who gets what rights to how much water. And you're correct that that process can typically take 10 to 15 years. That's not unheard of in issues like this. As to the comments made by Mr. Stein, there's one that I can address, which he mentioned twice tonight, with respect to the ratepayers of Oxnard paying for the advanced water purification facility, debt service, and for that operation of that facility when they're not directly receiving recycled water. Courts have already ruled directly on point on this issue. That's a very proper use allocation of funding. The ratepayers of Oxnard receive a tremendous benefit from recycled water plant. Even if they're not receiving the recycled water directly, there is a savings and a benefit to the basin by the decrease in use of groundwater pumping, which benefits all ratepayers in the city. So that is why the courts have held that that is a proper use and allocation of funding.
Mr. Early, could you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Early. Go ahead, Mr.
No,
City
Mr.
Manager.
Early, going back to the adjudication, can you outline who the parties are in that litigation? I don't want the public to think it's a free-for-all.
It's still uncertain who all of the parties are. It was initiated by a group of agricultural users who started it, but in that process, they have to give notice to everybody who is a potential defendant or potential party in the lawsuit. The city of Oxnard will certainly be one, but we're talking about usually people who are pumping groundwater, have wells, or receive water from a well somewhere in this basin. So this is not for end users or retail users. It's the wholesale providers, United Water, the city, and agricultural concerns that might have their own wells or pumping directly from the ground.
Thank you.
Is there any staff that can address the issue with respect to, are we in a water rationing time that we just haven't imposed it, or do we need to take an action as a council? Or is there a threshold that we need to hit before we go back and revisit this?
Chair, I can address that. We're in a stage 2 drought, and we do have scheduled watering, which is in our ordinance. Currently, our watering is every other day and opposite odd and even addresses, and 0 water runoff, 0 waste.
Okay,
But the question, part of the question is though, have we been enforcing that? And I know we do have a drought report update coming to the council, and I think that's where we'll discuss this. Mr. Castro, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Castro. Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. On the issue of the fountains and the, as Mr. Waterman mentioned, outdoor things, there is I'll let that go. I'm sure we'll get an update on what we're going to do, because the 1st of October is, and correct me if I'm wrong again, somebody, my understanding is the 1st of October is the beginning of the water season, the rain season. And it doesn't look like there's a lot of rain in the forecast for the next few months. So the groups, and I happen to be the city's representative, an alternate for the M&I municipal and industrial users on the GMA, the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management, where Ms. Klima and the outside attorney that the city has hired and all of the water staff supporting her are doing a tremendous job fighting for the city. In my opinion, she's carrying a lot of weight for other communities that are, we all want to work together, but sometimes it feels like she's carrying the weight of the whole city's, not just us, on her back. And I needed to share that with you. I need to share that with the public, and I will be bringing that up again when it comes to council. Any other questions? I think I've rambled here. Any other questions by the committee members?
Nope.
I want to thank my 2 committee members for the questions they did ask. Mr. Waterman, thank you. Mr. Castro, thank you. Mr. Maldonado, thank you. And Mr. Yanis, thank you. And City Manager, thank you very much. Do we have, and Mr. Early, thank you very much for clarifying that, because sometimes legal terms get around, and just like me asking Mr. Waterman, what did the abbreviation mean? And it's important. You get people like me that don't know and sometimes afraid to ask. There's no dumb question. The only one dumb is the one you don't ask. So do we have any direction?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to take this to council.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Chair. Member Lopez,
Yes.
Member Zaragoza,
Yes.
Chair Perrello.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you to all involved in this item. The next item is Public Works Department, subject an update on bicycle and pedestrian projects. The recommendation that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend that the City Council receive, sorry, I lost my place. Recommendations, the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend that the City Council receive and file a report on the status of the city's bicycle and pedestrian master plan. There was a video presentation, but because of the required Measure M pre-recorded presentation and the issues going on through court, it is not available now. It is available for the public to see if they find it on the city's website. They can find it. It indicates that Brian Yanis is the contact point. Is there any, are there any questions from the committee members on this item?
Mr. Chair, if I may very quickly, because our traffic engineer, Mr. Bokum, is on here. He's provided a fine presentation and a video.
Yes, tremendous.
There's a lot of information. So I'd like to see if I can ask Mr. Bokum to just give just a very, very brief summary of your presentation. Very, very brief, please. Thank you.
Before we do, are there any members of the public that were speaking on this, Madam Clerk?
We do not have any public speakers on this item, Chair Perrello.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, Chairperson Perrello and Member Lopez and Zaragoza. My name is Tim Bokum. I don't think I've met Council Member Lopez before, but I wanted to just give a really quick summary of the presentation that was done. Earlier this year, Council Member Turan requested that we provide an update on some of the projects and programs that the city is doing regarding bicycle and pedestrian safety. I'm sure that you've seen some of the newspaper articles of some of the collisions that we've had. We've had a couple of fatalities that have occurred. So what we did is we prepared a rather in-depth review of what we've actually accomplished in about the last 10 years in implementing elements of our bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And as part of the staff report and that presentation, we really prepared a series of tables for the council and the community to review. And those tables presented some of the very large projects that we've accomplished in that 10 years. And those are projects such as the Class 1 bicycle facility that we've constructed along Victoria Avenue, south of Gumtree to Gonzales. Many of the Class 2 bike lanes that we've installed on many of the streets in the city, as well as some of the protected bicycle facilities that we've installed, most recently on many of our resurfacing projects that we've done. We do take the opportunity of the major resurfacing projects that we accomplished at the city in order to implement new bikeway connections and pedestrian connections. And so I'm sure that you can all probably visualize in your mind some of the protected bike lanes that we've recently done on Rice and Rose Avenue, as well as some of the green paint that you may have noticed that's being installed around town in order to really differentiate where our bicycles should be going through intersections and to alert motorists where there may be conflicts that they should be looking at. The final two tables and the last half of the presentation that was prepared really talks about what's upcoming. And it's a very exciting time for the bicycle and pedestrian projects and programs that are coming forward, primarily funded through Measure E passage and some of the rather large investments that the council and the community is making in our streets improvements. It gives us a wonderful opportunity to sort of figure a way out to better utilize our asphalt space on our streets. And so we will be implementing complete streets aspects of many of the arterial and collector streets that we do our repaving program on. And I provided a couple of examples in the presentation of how we look forward to doing that. And then at the same time, even prior to my arrival at the city, Oxnard staff has been out soliciting grant applications from the state and federal government. And we have a number of projects that are moving forward that are either in design or going very quickly, very soon to construction. And those are projects such as completing the Class 1 facility that's parallel to Oxnard Boulevard that will connect the railroad trail from basically the Camino del Sol Gardens down to Cooper Avenue, Cooper Road, and also other bikeway projects that we're doing throughout the city connecting schools. We were very recently given notice that we received almost $2 million to make a major investment in planning safe route to school programs and projects in around 26 elementary, middle school, and high school locations in the city, and actually received funding, construction funding, to implement 6 of those plans. One of which you may have heard that last week we had a pedestrian incident near Harrington Elementary School. It wasn't necessarily related to the engineering or the enforcement aspects around the school. We had a parent that chose to drop their child off in a through lane, and the child unfortunately ran across the street and ran into the side of a vehicle. But Harrington is actually one of the schools that we received funding to move forward, do a full update to their safe route to school plan, and then implement improvements around there. So the report and the presentation really give an update. I guess the final thing I would let the committee know and the council know, the bicycle master plan is a little aged. It was completed in 2011 with a slight update in 2012. We weren't really successful in our financial lean years in getting local money, city funding to update that plan, but staff was successful in going out and getting state grants in order to do 2 really exciting projects, one of which is we're developing our first local roadway safety plan. That's looking at all the collisions in the city, our major barriers to safety, our signal timing issues, and coming up with a comprehensive plan that will recommend improvements. And we'll really identify maybe the top 5 locations we want to go out and get additional grant funding in order to make safety improvements out there. And then the other large project is our first sustainable transportation plan. This is a very large planning effort to bring all of our transportation plans sort of into one document, focusing on sustainable transportation principles and really try and start changing the culture of some of the circulation habits that we have in the city, identifying barriers to bicycle and pedestrian connections, identifying connectivity issues to try and get the major locations where people want to get to and from, and really develop a way that we can incorporate that information really into the general plan update that's going to start next year. And so those 2 big planning efforts are underway right now and will be taking place with some stakeholder meetings and some public workshops later this year and early next year. So I know that's probably a little bit longer than everybody wanted to hear, but it sort of sums up both the presentation and the staff report for everyone to understand.
Thank you, Mr. Bokum. I'm actually going to ask you to provide one more clarification, and this time I would like you to be brief. But I think this is often either confusing or simply unknown to the public, which is, can you just give a quick description of the different kinds of bike lanes, the class 1, 2, and 3, and so on? Just very brief, because I think that's very confusing for the public when they see different types of bike lanes. And
Certainly.
Of course, it is in your presentation and report, but again, just a very quick definition of each of those could be helpful. Thank you.
Certainly, Alex. The state of California and transportation officials in general have sort of established classifications of the various bike facilities that we try and describe. And they just simply have titles that try and separate for the general public what is being put in. So they vary from a fully separated facility, a bike path or a mixed use path that's shared between pedestrians and bicyclists, and that's called a class 1 facility. And it then goes down from there. So a class 2 facility is bike lanes that are established within a roadway they simply separate out the area that a bicyclist should travel from a vehicle. And so those are referred to as bike lanes. And then we have what's called a Class 3 facility, which is really establishing bicycle routes throughout your city, your neighborhoods, to let bicyclists and motorists know that they should be traveling along those corridors, because we focus bicycle elements and additional traffic control. There are some new classifications coming up that are newer. And those are generally classified as a Class 4 facility. Those are protecting the bike lanes that you may see in the street. And so many cities are looking into incorporating these Class 4 protected bike lanes, either by putting the bike lanes behind parked cars in a safer manner, or putting urban landscape material in there. And that's the type of items that we want to look at to include in our next update to the bicycle master plan. So there's some really good graphics in the presentation and also in the bicycle master plan if the public's interested in seeing how those lay out.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, Tim, very comprehensive report. And I read the whole thing, but it was mentioned before, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to find out what Class 1 was and Class 2 and 3. So C Street, is that Class 2? Is that?
C Street is actually now a combination of Class 2 and Class 3. We just completed the majority of that improvement project, Mr. Mayor. And where we could fit in the Class 2 bike lanes, particularly in downtown area, as well as some of the outer areas of downtown, we literally were able to stripe in bicycle lanes to give the bicyclists their own area. In the very constrained areas, pretty much north of 2nd Street, and in some of the areas there, we literally put what's called sharrows in to let the motorists and the bicyclists know that they're sharing those facilities. And so that is what's called a Class 3 bicycle route in those areas.
And I'm glad you clarified the definition, because I've had people say, what in the world is the city doing putting this bike lanes in the middle of the street and C Street? So,
Yes. We are working right now on a public information.
Thank you. I was going to say
some stuff to let people know what sharrows are all about, because they really serve two purposes. One, it's sort of to let the bicycles know they should be using that corridor, but it's also to let the motorists know to look for bicycles along the corridor, because you want to make sure that everybody knows they need to share that in a much better way.
That's some of the explanation I kept saying, is at least you know that the bike's going to be in front of you or behind you. And that's why the bikes are there. So, but anyway, at least we can call it a Class 2, potentially a Class 3, or a combination of. The other thing that I want to commend you for is that Safe Route to School monies, the funding of $2 million for 26 schools, for crossings, and I read the report of that one individual that said, that we needed some crossings. However, the mom sent the kid running across without even looking, and consequently, he got hit. So, but that, and I think you had education there too as part of the process.
Absolutely.
And I understand that Oxnard has potentially about 27,000 students, and that's a lot of students and a lot of education that I think it's going to be good that you're doing that, and putting the whole master plan together. How it combines with the grants, with the CPI, with the routes, and that general plan, bike / pedestrian plan, I think is important, and we need to convey that to the public. But I know you try to do it in 25 words or less, but it's a long, comprehensive report. Thank you again, Tim.
Sure, thank you.
Councilmember Lopez, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief and want to commend Mr. Bokum for the great presentation. It's unfortunate you can't give it live. I think, especially at our council meeting, it would be a great benefit to the entire council, but most importantly, the public, to hear this live. So I do hope that we can get a couple more views on the recording of it. So thank you for that, and want to thank our public works staff for all the work that has been happening, that it's been very visible and clear, the work that has been happening on the bike lanes and the safe routes, along Oxnard Boulevard, C Street, Vineyard Avenue, you would have to really not be paying attention to miss the work that is being done out there. So thank you for that, and I definitely support forwarding this presentation to the rest of the city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bokum. Your video, your presentation was very good. I appreciate the city manager asking for you to make some comments here, because we can all look and see how many people have checked the video, and it's a city of almost 250,000 people, and we find out that there's not as many checking.
Yeah.
A couple of comments you made on your video, I'd like to compliment you on and question you on one specific. You mentioned that we need to adjust the culture in the city. And I think that is a very meaningful comment. It is not about one kind of person or another kind of person or a third kind of person. It's a kind of a situation that the mayor and the councilwoman have addressed. Parents, my neighborhood, and I'm sure other neighborhoods, they drive up, they're late, dump the kid off, and away we go. The fatality we had in Colonia was an underage driver that had been sent by the parents to drop the kid off, and they did, but they ran over somebody else's child and killed him. And it was this tragedy all the way around. But there are things that people need to be aware of. If you want to bring a kid into the world and you're going to take the responsibility of them, and you're going to take them to school because you're concerned about them walking, you need to be aware there's other people's children at risk. There's your kid at risk. And just as this one, the kid ran in front of the car and ran into the side of a vehicle, we're lucky it wasn't a worse situation. I avoid Oxnard Union High School District on Gonzales Road like the plague when I see parents doing things that they do with the kids. And these are not toddlers. These are high school kids. These are a few years away from getting a driver's license, a few years away from registering for the draft, a few years away from being able to vote. And you see them do things that it's like, man, where is mom and dad? And what's mom and dad looking? You know, who's paying attention? So that's a comment that I had. And you also made, and I want to thank you for, it's a cultural thing. It's across the board, not just in Oxnard. You also made a comment shouting out to the Public Works for all the work that they've done. And I think it's a class act on your part. There's a lot of people. It's not just a person just like me. It's, what am I? I'm just a guy that won an election. I put my pants on like you guys do, and I'm here. But there's a lot of people that you represent and you work with. And in that comment, it shows a class act for the people that we got working for this city. I want to thank you. But now for a question. You mentioned that we're going to put some bulb outs at some intersections. If they are the same thing that they did at Rio del Norte School, it took a learning curve for the adults driving the cars. As soon as they hit that, went over the curb, knocked down the pylon, tore up their wheel in the front bumper to learn that it was a bulb. Can you explain how that works and what that is and how we're going to let people know that it's coming? Because especially depending on the time of year we do it, if it's done towards the fall, it'll be dark. And there are people that still in my neighborhood that complain. We put the kids out as sitting ducks on these bulbs, shortening the distance on the crosswalk. Please explain how that works and the rationale.
Sure. Well, I can give you the general intent of the bulb outs. I'm not sure of the exact design of that particular location, but I can take an additional look at it to see if it can maybe be modified a little bit. But in general, the bulb out purpose is really to do two things. It's to get the pedestrians out from the curb so that motorists, as they're coming down the road, they can see them and the pedestrians can see down the street. Literally, that's the reason that it's called a bulb out, is to get it a little bit further for really the safe visibility. They also sort of choke the intersection, and that's probably what you may be seeing out there. That intersection may have been choked a little bit too much. And what you want to do is find that nice sweet spot where you're narrowing the road for that visual cue to slow down a little bit, but you're not narrowing it enough where you may have turning problems or you may have a curb that's protruding out a little too far. And so there are design parameters that we can use in order to make sure there's enough area for that so that cars can get through there. In many of our, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
One quick que-
I just
one-
wanted to say, one of the
okay.
things that we would do on any new ones that come through, we want to make sure that we have good passage for our bicyclists to get through our choker locations and our bulb locations. And that may be something that wasn't included in that particular location, but that's a design parameter that we look for in anything new that we would do.
Thank you.
My
Go ahead, Mayor.
apologies. My apologies for interrupting, but the one thing that people complain about is there's no reflection, there's no reflective items to see the bola. There's a lot of people run through it and damage their front ends and so forth. But I think maybe protective paint or some kind of a mechanism to share with the folks that it's there. I think it'd be something that could really help tremendously.
Absolutely. I can look into that. And for the three members and anybody in the public, if you have requests or suggestions that you want to have us take a look at, definitely enter into the 311 system or send us an email and we'll take a look at it.
Thank you, Chair. Mhm.
Mayor, I can share this with you. The past mayor, Mr. Holden, when this issue was brought to him and he was the mayor, he came out and looked at it and there were some adjustments. The people still knocked over the pylons with the reflectors. They didn't last very long. And there was a suggestion of putting it on a spring, so at least it would come back up. And that worked for a while. But you're absolutely right, Mayor. And the city is very fortunate to have a city traffic engineer like Mr. Boken working for it.
Maybe reflective paint might be something that we could use. But anyway, thank you.
It could be. And one last thing, with respect to the bicycle, there are more than a few individuals that when they're on a bicycle and they come up to intersections, it's as if the stop sign and the red light doesn't mean anything to them. And, they're going to go through and it's as if they consider themselves bulletproof or they just don't care. And then when there's a tragedy, the person in the car has got to live with that the rest of their life. So I don't know. And I know that we don't have the money for a policeman at every intersection, but I think that a sweep of enforcement, and I know the city is looking at that, will help a lot. And again, this is thank you. And thank the city manager for asking Mr. Bokum to speak a little because the public needs to be aware of this.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
this just.
I just want to take a quick mention that on that particular issue, our police department has done a really good job in getting education and enforcement out there. And as mentioned in the staff report, they recently received word that they've been the recipient of additional grant funds to do more bicycle rodeos out there to at least get some of the safe riding principles out for our younger school children. And so we'll be seeing that in the next year, and the police department will be bringing that forward.
And that's fabulous. The concern that I have is some of them that they're not young, the ones that are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Thank you. City attorney, this is just a receive and file.
It's actually a recommendation that go to the city council.
That would be my recommendation, Mr. Chair, that we receive and file and send it to the full city council.
I will second that. Any further comments by the committee members? No. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Member Zaragoza,
Yes.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Chair Perrello.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Tim.
Madam Clerk, I can tell you're feeling, and as you've addressed me, a little under the weather.
A little bit.
Feeling better. Hope you get better.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is item. What did I do with it? The next is items for future agendas. I'm sorry. Oh, God.
No, I don't have one.
Thank you.
Do you, are there any questions about items for future agendas?
No.
No. Okay, I have a couple of questions for items future agendas. I've asked in the past about an update on the water pressure in the areas of the city of Oxnard with fire hydrants. And I suggest in the future, when it comes to items on the future agendas, once every 2 months, we get a list of the items that were supposed to be discussed and we find out when we can talk about it. Otherwise, we forget. And with the minutes coming up and being more prompt, we can find, because there was an item on one of the minutes we approved for a future agenda. And I don't want to let them go in the wind. No disrespect to anybody. With that, any final comments from the city manager, city attorney, public works?
No, sir.
No, thank you.
Okay. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen, please stay safe.
Thank you, you too. Good night.
Good night.